Someone else that's got the gig is actually a very good friend of mine. We've spoken on more than one occasion. Always eloquent, Professor George Lomonossoff, a virologist at the John Innes Centre. George, welcome to the show.
Hello, good evening.
First of all, George, is it wrong for people to debate the vaccine, to worry about its efficacy or side effects?
Oh, no, I don't think that's wrong at all. I mean, I think it's always a good thing to question and to ask why. But on the other hand, I'd also say that, should also maybe keep an open mind and be open to persuasion on the other hand as well. But no, by all means, ask about these questions. And because I would say things like thalidomide have cast a very long shadow. And there's a lot of that thought about medical, in that case, a drug, causing problems. And I think, maybe we're living a little bit with that as well.
Yes. Now, George, I've been double vaccinated, but I defend to the death the right of Ingrid or anyone watching this programme not to have it. The good news is that the vaccine rollout in this country has been a fantastic success and take-up has been huge, particularly in comparison to countries like France and Germany. However, what are your thoughts about the potential risks of the vaccine, side effects? What's your professional view?
Well, they're very minor. There have been these very rare conditions associated with cerebral hemorrhages to do with particularly the AstraZeneca one, the adenovirus-based one. But that was a great issue in terms of numbers. It was more to let the doctors, the medical community, know what to look for, and to treat that kind of condition differently than you would normally treat a cerebral hemorrhage, because that treatment is somewhat different. But I mean, basically, vaccines have been a fantastic lifesaver since, their invention in any kind of recognisable sense. We were at the very end of the 18th century. And so we've had, as you correctly said, many vaccines produced over the years. And then suddenly we get this rapid one in response to an emerging outbreak. And I can see why it looks so different. The speed of which things become available.
Oh, can I ask something though, George? But it is different because it's all laboratory made. And we've had vaccines for a long, long time, absolutely, that have been very and highly effective. But they've taken 5 to 7 years, let's say, to go through rigorous testing and a very wide range of tests. But this is completely different. This is sort of like mRNA-based technology, which is quite new. And it is very experimental. And the fact that actually this hasn't been given the full authorisation, it's emergency use only authority, in itself says it's not, you don't know that it's safe. None of us know at this point.
Well, the reason why some of the previous vaccines took a long time was the way you had to try and track down what the causative agent was. And if you go back a few years, say to the early part of the 20th century, that was a major undertaking, even to begin to know what you were dealing with. And it's really that part which has been short-circuited in the last 20, 30 years, that you can very quickly find out that the cause of this kind of respiratory syndrome was a coronavirus. And it's unthinkable even 30 years ago you could do it that quickly. But then have these completely synthetic ways, you're quite right, in making vaccines without having to grow up the virus and finding ways of doing it safely, because it's a dangerous viral pathogen, and then purify it and make it safe to administer. In a way, I'd say the synthetic ones are potentially much safer than the original classic ones, which actually involve trying to either weaken, attenuate, or kill what is actually a disease-causing organism, which you have to handle.
I just would like to... I'm not challenging it, but I really would love to know the answer to this question. So Dr. Robert Malone was the original inventor of mRNA technology, and he is concerned about some of the reactions that have been discovered so far. And obviously, to begin with, he thought it was absolutely marvellous because he understands the whole system as you do as well. But now there are things coming through, like the blood clots, myocarditis, all various things like the swellings on the brain, how it's affecting children. Across the board. And now he's he's stepping back a little bit, going, really, this is not all that it was originally cracked up to be. So, but where do you stand on that? Do you feel that at the same time, we should be cautious and we shouldn't be accepting so readily, get the jab, off you go, 1, 2, 3, and you're done?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I mean, absolutely, it should be monitored, and for any reactions. I mean, which is what does happen, and because obviously the kind of scale of the number of people being administered the vaccine is hugely greater in a program. We're now, 50, 60 million. Whereas a clinical trial is typically 20, 30,000. So you're getting far more data, far more statistically relevant data than you ever would through a clinical trial. And so it's very important that you do monitor and see if there's anything unexpected comes out, especially as you go to different age groups, and to see what... if anything unexpected happens, which you didn't see in the clinical trial.
Well, because
that's
George,
what you do with any new medicine.
George, people will be concerned, for example, that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which I've had, is now not available to young adults because of a concern about blood clots, which is definitely, therefore a cause for concern, isn't it? And also the fact that these enormous pharmaceutical companies are not going to be liable if the vaccine proves to have been dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, so obviously the RNA-based, the Pfizer-BioNTech one, tends to be given to younger people because people react slightly differently at different ages. Their immunity is slightly different. There is also a question about, as you say, I don't know that much about the sort of liability issue. But of course, the other thing you talked about, emergency use. And of course, if you were to say, would you ever have a vaccine against something you're not likely to get? So, for instance, you mentioned travelling and, say, having yellow fever at certain parts of the world. Well, unless you're going there, you wouldn't just have it routinely. There's absolutely no point. But the issue was that we were in an emergency. And I think the latest figures worldwide are between 3 and 4 million people have died. And, I mean, that's
but then that must be on a par with lots of other flus. We've had avian flu, we've had swine flu. What was the one that was in the early 60s or 50s? What was that called? Sorry, I'm looking at it.
There's one, I mean, there were all sorts of...
Spanish flu in the 1930s.
Oh, yeah, in the 1920s, 1919, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But can I just say something, just throw a spanner completely in the works? What about Sweden? How can that be explained against all the countries that had the vaccination and actually look at their figures now, and they have got the herd immunity, which is what actually Boris Johnson set out to do originally. That was his original plan here, and then was kind of persuaded not to.
Well, the issue with Sweden is very interesting because they took a different path than their two neighbouring countries, which are Norway and Finland.
And I'm from Norway.
They're good.
I'm from Norway, actually, so my family are in Norway, and I keep on asking them, and I'm at battle with them. I mean, I'm at battle with everybody, it seems, in my family. But, I mean, yes, to begin with, and there's only been about 700 deaths, and they have gone completely the other way. And it is a weirdo. That one I can't explain myself, and I try to explain it to my brothers and sisters who are arguing with me every single day over it. But I keep banging out the Sweden one, and I just think in the long run, maybe Norway's doing terribly well now, but I just think in the long run, maybe everybody in Sweden, the next generation and future generations, will be much healthier than the Norwegians, and they'll be wiped out.
Yes, I mean,
it's not a big country anyway.
COVID deaths at the moment in Sweden are 0, and perhaps because of no formal lockdown and other COVID measures such as a mask mandate, perhaps they have herd immunity.
Yeah.
Well, they also, I'm sure, are doing a significant vaccination program. I think it was the Prime Minister, thought their policy was a failure, actually, in Sweden, and compared with, say, Finland, which I know a little bit more about, where they do quite a very severe lockdown. So, and you will get, numbers varying. The population of Sweden is about, off the top of my head, about 10 million. And so it's a much smaller country and much less densely populated than the UK, which does make quite a difference to the spread of the rest.
George, with the clock against us, and we do need to wrap this up, but should young people, such as the over 12s, be vaccinated, given that they don't face a mortal threat from the virus?
I mean, if the vaccine's available, I would say yes, and most countries do, like the US does, for instance, because they can still spread it. And we still don't know. The one thing which is
But you
real...
can still get COVID and you can still spread it once you've had the jab, Professor.
Yeah, like Boris Johnson.
You can do, yeah, but less so. Yes, so. But there's also the issue of long COVID. And that's something we're not going to see unwind by its very nature for a long time. And that is a concern.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.